we need to start talking about the Assyrian Empire at the end of this particular module, because Israel enters into the Assyrian annals, their recorded history, at the Battle of Karkar, mid-9th century, around 853. King Ahab is actually mentioned in the annals as someone who engaged in military combat the Assyrian Empire under Ashurnasirpal II's successor. So right around this time that this palace at Kalhu is being built, Israel and Assyria are beginning to come on a crash course. Ashurnasirpal, the king who sat in this throne room, was a figure who mentions in his defeat of the record of his defeat of Tela, capturing hundreds and thousands of prisoners, cutting off their noses, gouging out their eyes. A lot of this mutilation imagery is known from the Assyrian records, and it sheds light on stories from judges. Just as in the story of the judge Deborah, we know that when Barak and Deborah defeat the forces of the Canaanite general Sisera, that he runs for miles and miles and miles. We know that enemy generals retreated and were chased for miles and miles and miles because the very king who ruled in this palace, Ashurnasirpal II, talks about pursuing an enemy general all the way up into the mountains. So we get historical light shed on the sorts of facts and images that are reported in these judges' stories, and we know that they fit the milieu. But I hasten to add immediately that there's a difference between the witness of the biblical stories about what God is doing in Israel and the boasts of a mighty emperor like Ashurnasirpal. Ashurnasirpal is bombastic, he's egotistic, his view of good government is totalitarian, restricting the freedom, controlling the lives of his subjects and certainly of his enemy captives, whereas the biblical stories emphasize not the human leader, not the chieftain in charge of the tribes, but God's initiative as the divine warrior. And the language and the theology is not one of totalitarianism, but it's one of God caring and wanting relationship, and thus opening up space for human freedom to respond in covenant love with the covenant suzerain, Yahweh. One of the nice things about studying Assyria and their reliefs is that lots of motifs, lots of symbolisms, lots of images and patterns are clarified. So in this city of Kalhu, Nimrud, we had many deposits of ivories found, beautiful ivory carvings, probably originally plated with gold, that illustrate all sorts of things in the Bible, such as cherubim, guardian creatures, mixed creatures, explaining figures in the Garden of Eden. We have the cosmic tree represented, which explains in many ways the way that the Assyrian king associated himself with the center of the universe. The Weltbaum, the cosmic tree, helps explain and illuminate what was the problem with Adam and Eve focusing in and grabbing divine power from a tree in the center of the universe, in the Garden of Eden. So already, again, we learn so much from encountering this Assyrian empire, culture, iconography, and ideology.